start off with going to the second slide, please, to just give a little introduction of myself for those of you that don't know me. I did have the privilege a couple years ago of speaking to a group of Norwegian breeders at Bjerke. And that talk was a more general talk about breeding. But since I didn't want to be repeating that, I thought that talking about breeding or buying and breeding broodmares would be an interesting topic for us to discuss. As Per Erik probably told you, I started my life actually as a medical doctor. I practiced medicine for about 20 years, and I did have a bit of a background in college and medical school in genetics, which has helped me through the years a great deal. My family was very involved with Hanover shoe farms and standardbred horse sales, and I basically grew up around those companies. I became president of Standardbred in 2004 and vice president of Hanover Shoe Farms at that time. I sat in every year on the booking committee at Hanover, which chose the matings for our broodmares. I actually started my little Windsong stable before I joined Standardbred in Hanover back in 1997. I raise and sell about 10 yearlings each year. I am the breeder, as Per Erik said, the 2004 trotting Triple Crown-winner Windsongs Legacy, who, as I'm sure you know, is the kind of early leader of the now dominant sire line through Chapter 7 and his son Walner. My family also bred Norwegian-owned Age Trotter of the Year in the U.S., Rotation, a balanced image horse, out of my mother's champion mare Expressway Hanover. I'm also the breeder of the U.S. stallion Swan For All, who is the leading sire in Indiana, number 6 overall in the U.S. and sire of world champion Hannelore Hanover. He has a full brother, Swan in a Million, who is a sire in Indiana. And I have 2 young sires in Ohio. The first one, Long Tom, who was New Jersey Sire Stakes champion and a Stanley Dancer winner. He is already the sire of world champion Rumble Strips, who took a record of 153 2/5 on a half-mile track. And in range, a bar-hopping stallion who just served a full book his first year. Very recently, a Muscle Hill stallion that I bred, Get Legs, was sold to Illinois Interest, and he'll be standing there next year. We also bred a horse by the name of P J Punjab, who was quite successful in Finland, became a sire there. On the mare side in Europe, Swept to Victory and Bring Me Luck US had quite amount of success in Sweden and both set national marks in Denmark. Can I have the next slide, please? So after all that introduction, well, I guess I should tell you what I do and what I think works. I generally don't have enough money to buy the very elite top racing fillies who have top sires and very elite families. Those have generally been too expensive for me. Through the years, probably the average price that I've paid for mares has been around 40 to 50,000, which is not cheap by any means, but it certainly isn't at the very top. It's much more difficult, I think, to get a great champion from a more modest mare, but I think it can be done. This reminds me a little bit of a story I read in Hoofbeats years ago about the U.S. Owner Jeff Snyder, who always bought the very best fillies in the very best families and crossed them after their racing careers with the very best stallions. And needless to say, Jeff was a big success as a breeder. And Hoofbeats asked him what the secret of his success was, and he just shrugged and just said, well, it's quite easy for me. And I think that's indicative of the fact that if you do have the best, you may very well breed the best. But for those of us without unlimited funds, I search for productive maternal families with multiple superior racing performers along the tail female line, which is just a fancy way of saying I look for horses that have a lot of good performers on their catalog page. Now, I have found that I can save a lot of money without compromising the mare's ability to produce good babies by accepting less commercially attractive broodmare sires, especially if that broodmare sire is an outcross to popular commercial stallions. And you'll see a list of some of the mares that I have had through the years. Yankee Windsong and Expressway Hanover were by Practice. I don't think anybody thinks of Practice as being a very top broodmare sire. My wonderfully productive mare, Bax Machine, was by the Balanced Image sire, Earl from Ontario. Again, a sire of very modest accomplishments. My Great Swan Lake was by Lindy Lane. I have 2 Glide Master mares right now. I have a very good Amigo Hall mare, and I'm trying to get a good baby from a Lucky Chucky mare. So buyers see brood mares by these relatively minor sires and usually are not willing to pay top price for it. If they're from a really good maternal family and they're nice individuals, you can get a very nice mare for not a lot of money. Next slide, please. Now, with that strategy, though, you must accept that the marketplace seldom immediately rewards you as a breeder with high prices for your yearlings from those kind of mares. Usually you have to wait for a productive performer before they will pay high prices. In general, though, you can also find good opportunities for broodmare prospects from older families. The first dam may have already had 8 foals. The mare may no longer be very commercial, or I should say the first dam may be not very commercial anymore, but you may be able to get a very, very nice broodmare prospect from her without a lot of money. I also am very happy to buy mares with acute but minor injuries, with, of course, proper veterinary examination. I've bought 4 or 5 mares and saved a lot of money who had scrapes and scratches and gouges from shipping. I bought a sister to a world champion whose legs were swollen and filled just from standing in a stall, not getting exercise, her legs filled. All of that went away after the sale, and I got her at a very good price. Next slide, please. Now, I also prefer brood mares with favorable line breeding or even inbreeding, and I'm going to show you a couple examples of some really productive inbred mares. Inbred mares can be very special producers. My very best mares often have serial inbreeding over several generations. Now, it's not enough to be inbred. You need to see inbreeding from very top horses. Simply being inbred to a mediocre horse means that you are going to get even more of that mediocre horse. So that's not an advantage. Look for inbreeding from the very best stallions or very top mares. Now, if a brood mare does not have special favorable line breeding, I like to look for outcrossed pedigrees that reflect successful golden crosses, or as the thoroughbreds call them, nicks. This strategy is most successful if the sire and broodmare sire are well established. It's very hard to apply the Golden Cross data to very young stallions simply because there isn't much data out there yet. You may look at the data from that young stallion's sire or even from the broodmare's sire's sire, but the results are likely less predictive. Maternal line breeding to prominent broodmare sires that were not successful sires of sires can be a bonus, as this may interfere less with sire line choices. Now that's a little difficult to follow, but let's just say in the U.S., such a horse was Pine Chip. I realize Pine Chip was extremely successful in Europe, but there isn't a real Pine Chip stallion line in the U.S. So if you find Pine Chip in the maternal family, that can be very helpful as an independent source of speedster to future pedigrees. I also look for particularly prominent females in the maternal family. My absolute favorite, and it's not very surprising, is Yankee Duchess. Allegro is a favorite as well. She is in the maternal family of Manchego, Lookout Victory, Possess the Magic, Magic Tonight. It's just a very hot, very productive family. I love BJ's Pleasure and therefore Martina Hanover, and Misty Hanover is a special favorite as well. Can I have the next slide, please? I also give a bonus to the mare if the maternal lines go directly to prominent or foundation mares. such as Margaret Parrish, Medio, Nervola Bell, Mambrino Beauty. For those of you who are familiar with Norman Hall's pedigree matching work, Norman especially focuses on Margaret Parrish and believes that mares with prominent Margaret Parrish are a feature of Walner's best offspring. A mare by a less popular sire, as I think I've already said this, a mare by a less popular sire may have more outcross sire line opportunities, which then gives you more stallion alternatives and a greater opportunity to focus on conformation issues. You see so many young race fillies offered as broodmare prospects who are bred as crosses from the very most popular sire lines. And when you quickly realize that there may be only one sire line left that that particular filly is open to. I try to stay away from fillies like that because it's always possible that one sire line may not work very well with any particular mare, but another one will. So it's best to keep your options open. I will seldom buy a maiden mare unless she has at least 4 to 5 obvious, attractive commercial stallion prospects from at least 2 major sire lines. So you really have to look hard at these pedigrees before you buy. Commercially, the best value is usually with maiden mares, as first foals often bring good prices. And as we all know, a mare that is already produced really good racehorses becomes very expensive to buy. A mare that has unsuccessful offspring will usually not sell her next yearlings well. I informally looked at this during my time at Standard Bred, and in general, a full sibling to a failed first foal is often sold for anywhere from 40 to 60% less at auction, unless the mare herself was a really top race mare. So you don't always get a bargain if the mare is in foal to a stallion that she's already produced a baby with that was a failure on the racetrack. New slide, please. Common breeding mistakes, and I'm sure we've all heard them, and probably several of us, including me, have learned my lesson the hard way on some of these. We'll breed a mare, put her on the track, and she has no talent. How many times have we heard somebody say, well, she's no good on the racetrack, I might as well breed her? Well, if she was no good on the racetrack, maybe she's not going to be very good as a broodmare. That doesn't always hold, but it should make you think twice before spending a lot of money on a mare who's already been a racing failure, unless maybe she's a full sibling to a really, really great race mare. How many times have you seen people with very cheap mares breed them to expensive stallions and thinking somehow they're going to get a great baby? It's only basic genetics that the stallion and the mare each contribute 50% of the genes to the foal. And if the mare has nothing to offer, very seldom can an elite, expensive stallion overcome her lack of genetic potential? Or how about a mare who has produced nothing from multiple foals? Sometimes we think, well, this time she has to have a good one. I'll breed her again, and maybe even to a more extensive stallion. There are actually commercial farms that I won't name in America who have pursued exactly that strategy for years and are seldom rewarded for it. And then how about if you have an unattractive yearling with low commercial value from a bad mare? How many times have you heard people say, well, he won't sell for any money at auction, so I might as well train him myself? Well, you're most likely throwing away money. Remember that even at an elite sale like Lexington and Harrisburg, fewer than 10% of the yearlings go on to win 100,000 or more in their career. You have to have a potential racehorse with genetic potential to expect them to do well. Very seldom do they come out of nowhere. Next slide, please. Now, this is a very basic genetics inheritance slide. And I've often said that if you're into meditation and want to just sit quietly and stare at this slide for hours and think about what it really means, you can learn probably more than you can by listening to people like me talk for hours. Very basic. Every generation produces genetic material that decreases by half every generation. Each parent produces 50% of the genes for the foal. Grandparents, 25%. Great-grandparents, 12.5%. The fourth generation, 6.25%. Fifth generation, 3.1%. Sixth generation, 1.5%. You can see that the relative genetic contribution by any individual on this slide reduces dramatically the farther back you go in generations. How many times have we listened to some very expert breeder tell us that because there is a horse in the fifth or sixth generation, that's why this racehorse is so good? Look at how little contribution that horses back that far make. Concentrating your efforts in the first 3 to 4 generations is really about as far back as one can expect to have a real influence on the foal. And you'll see some of the implications of this when I start talking about specific mares and their offspring as I go on. Next slide, please. We might as well start with my very first broodmare, Yankee Windsong. In 1997, I had never bought any horses before. I was just starting to think about getting back into the business. I didn't have a lot of money. and I looked at this mare in the catalog. If you look at her times, she really wasn't that much of a racehorse. She raced in county fairs, took only a 206 record at 2, a qualifying record of 202 and 1 at 3, and didn't make a lot of money. But what caught my eye? Well, what caught my eye was her maternal family. Her dam, Yankee Scotty, was a filly produced by the great Yankee Duchess. At that point, Yankee Glide, TV Yankee, Diesel Don, and Fox Valley Flan were already established racehorses. I loved Hickory Pride and Misty Hanover. You can look at her tail female family. It goes back to the classic Membrino Beauty through Nervolo Bell, who is in the 6th generation. She is pretty much what I could afford. I thought we would bid up to $25,000, and I got other members of my family to agree to own her with me. I had never bid on a horse before, and I asked my brother-in-law to bid for me. We all agreed that we would go to $25,000. So he bids $20,000. Someone else bids $21,000, and he waves his hands and says no more. And I'm just very surprised at this point. And the auctioneer saw I was upset about this. I'm yelling at him across the crowd saying, "Why did you stop?" And he just said, "That's enough." I put up my hand and bid $23,000, and she was mine. Of course, she ended up being the dam of Windsongs Legacy. When you look at her pedigree, you see some 3x3 inbreeding to Star's Pride in the orange. But to me, when I bought her, the power was all in that tail female maternal line. And I forgave her the fact that her sire was Practice. So next slide, please. Let's try to figure out why Yankee Windsong and also Yankee Bambi and Yankee Flight all became such great broodmares. Well, here is Yankee Duchess's pedigree. And as you can see, she is the product of very intense inbreeding. She is 3x3 to full brother and sister, Peter Volo and Volga E, on the top and the bottom of the pedigree. Again, Nervolo Bell in on the bottom and on the maternal line of Peter Volo is one of the most outstanding mare lines in the sport. Yankee Duchess is also inbred 5x4x3 to Guy Axworthy. So we see a lot of concentrated line breeding and inbreeding to 2 different sire lines. Now let's go then to the next generation, who Charlie Keller believes is the real secret to Yankee Duchess's success. Next slide, please. And that is Yankee Duchess's dam China L. look at how closely that she is inbred. You have Guy Yaxworthy 3x2 and Peter the Great 3x3. So the pattern that resulted in great mares like Yankee Windsong and Yankee Flight and Yankee Bambi were the result of serial multi-generation inbreeding to two different very prominent sire lines. This concentrated a great deal of genetic power within that line, which then produced multiple great stallions. May I have the next slide, please? And so that brings us to Windsongs Legacy. So after all this wonderful concentrated maternal inbreeding and line breeding, how did I pick Conway Hall for her? Well, I didn't do that by pedigree. I simply outcrossed her with Conway Hall, and the reason I did that is that I watched Yankee Windsong's first babies. There were 2 Super Bowls and 1 balanced image. 2 of the 3 were very fast, but they were a little crazy. They just didn't have good temperaments. I traveled to Kentucky and met Conway Hall, and he was very smart, very calm, very even-tempered. I thought that his body type, his conformation, was very similar to the very best characteristics of Yankee Windsong's offspring, Moonlight G, for example. And so I just thought that those physical and temperament factors from Conway Hall would work very well. And even though he was an outcross to that maternal inbreeding, this could result in a superior individual. And of course, Windsongs Legacy won the Triple Crown because I was lucky enough to have the genes come together in the right combinations to produce a champion. Let's go to the next slide. Here is another of my most successful brood mares, Swan Lake. Now, you can see right away that she is intensely inbred. She is 3x2 to Baltic Speed with additional lines of Speedy Scott, Speedy Crown. Her tail female line includes one of my favorite mares, Allegro. That family was just blossoming to be extremely productive. And the tail female goes back to Medio. As I mentioned, this was the family of Manchego, Possess the Magic, Magic Tonight. She was very successful with almost any stallion that I bred her to. Swan Image won a Breeders' Crown elimination and over 600,000. He was by Balanced Image. Magic Swan was the New Jersey Sire Stakes champion at 2 and 3. He was by Enjoy Levesque in his last year in the U.S. before the U.S. gave up on him. Swan For All and Swan in a Million were both by Andover Hall, and Swanderful was by S.J.'s Caviar. Essentially, I could breed her to anything and get a good racing colt. And again, that shows the power of outcrossing a successfully inbred mare. Next slide. Swan For All, then you'll see is an example of her offspring. And as you can see, I chose him largely, I chose Andover Hall largely because he was an outcross stallion. There's relatively little duplication toward the front of his pedigree. Swan For All, as I mentioned, is the sire of Hannelore Hanover, Breeders' Crown winner, $50 bill, and lots of other top horses. Next slide. Here is Back's Machine. Back's Machine was also one of my most productive mares. She herself was a fairly successful racehorse in Canada. When you look at her pedigree, you also see intense line breeding with Speedster. She is 4x5 by 4x3 to Speedster. Just like Swan Lake and Yankee Windsong, when you outcrossed Back's Machine, really good things happened. She was the dam of Baximum, who won over 600,000. He was a bluegrass winner. He was by Cantab Hall. Backs of Life won over $600,000 racing in Canada. She was a Breeders' Crown elimination winner and a Miss Versatility final winner. She was by Windsongs Legacy. Bouncing Backs was the New York Sire Stakes champion. She was by Credit Winner. Six Backs, $350,000 winner was by Cadabra. Never Backs Down by Angus Hall. He won $230,000. And an old friend of mine in Per Eric's named Q45, who became a successful older horse, a silver division winner in Sweden. Again, because of Back's Machine's very concentrated speedster blood, I was able to outcross her with multiple stallions and be very successful. If we had to understand where the real inbreeding then was in her pedigree, let's look at her dam Seconds Ahead. Next slide. Seconds Ahead, of course, as you can see, was 3x2 to Speedster. And I don't know if this matters at all, but interestingly, she is 6x3 to a mare named Tilly Tonka, who is the second dam of the old Hanover stallion Hootman. There are so again, that kind of serial multi-generation line breeding resulted in a very productive mare who could be outcrossed to multiple stallions and give you big champions. Next slide. And just as an illustration, here is Backs of Life. She was by Windsongs Legacy. Again, you can see there's really not very much duplication toward the front of the pedigree. Windsongs Legacy was very much an outcross sire for Back's Machine. Next slide. And here is my current pride and joy, Ilya. She is also the product of a deliberate multiple generation breeding program that I'll outline shortly. She is dam of 3 top racehorses in range, won almost 800,000, was prominent in the Pennsylvania Sire Stakes at 2 and was second in the Canadian Trotting Classic at 3, or sorry, second in the Breeders' Crown at 3, I should say. Tight lines, got good as an older horse, won over 600,000 and was a track record holder at Dover Downs. Long Tom by Muscle Hill was the 3-year-old New Jersey Sire Stakes champion and Dancer Memorial winner who took one bad step in the Hamiltonian elimination and broke. Otherwise, I think he certainly would have won that elimination. Long Tom and In Range, as I mentioned, are now sires in Ohio. If you look at Ilya's pedigree, you can see lots of line breeding and inbreeding. A little different than some of the others is that she is line bred, or inbred, I should say, 3 to 3 to a broodmare, not a sire, Yankee Scotty, who was a daughter of Yankee Duchess. Yankee Scotty is the second dam of her sire, Windsongs Legacy, and second dam of her dam, Tasha Yar. Next slide, please. And again, let's look back at the foundation of Ilya's success, Tasha Yar. There's an interesting story behind Tasha. She was quite a successful racehorse in Canada, won over $250,000. She was bought by Hanover and was bred on multiple occasions to stallions like Balanced Image, Yankee Paco, twice to Donna Rail, once to SJ's Caviar, and finally was in fold Lindy Lane when Hanover decided that she had failed as a broodmare and needed to be culled. She was scheduled to be taken to the Delaware, Ohio sale, and where she probably would have brought $3,000 or $4,000. Looking at her pedigree, on the bottom tail female line, you have second dam as Yankee Scotty and third dam as Yankee Duchess. There are other interesting things in the pedigree. Her sire, Super Pleasure, is a full brother to American Winner. There are lots of interesting things going on, therefore, that I can take advantage of later. In any case, of her offspring bred by Hanover, only 3 had race records when Hanover called her. Now, I went to Jim Simpson and I basically said that I really thought that she still had a lot of possibility, both as a mare and eventually in producing successful brood mares in the next generation, because of her bottom line of Yankee Duchess and because of the presence of super pleasure in the pedigree. I also felt, for other reasons that I won't get into, that she was carrying a foal by Lindy Lane, and that foal I thought could be successful. I tried to talk Mr. Simpson into keeping her and breeding her some more, and he just said, no, she's going on the truck and we're selling her. So I bought her privately for $7,500, which was more than they would have gotten out in Ohio. The Lindy Lane foal eventually became Morgan's sweetheart, who was a 153 mare and won over 300,000. The SJ's Caviar that Hanover had bred was renamed John Hannibal Smith, and he became a successful older racehorses, making almost 300,000. I then bred her subsequently to stallions like Windsongs Legacy and SJ's Caviar, who would double the presence of Yankee Duchess in their pedigrees. And I kept Ilia specifically first to race and then become a broodmare. These other horses out of Tashiar were reasonably successful racehorses, but no big stars. Ilia herself was somewhat successful at 3 as a racehorse. She didn't really do very much at 2, but she won 4 races in a stake races in a row at 4, and then tied up, or sorry, at 3, and then tied up, and I quit with her. But you will then see what I was able to do with her as a broodmare. Next slide. This was her first foal, Tight Lines. His sire was Yankee Glide. Again, you see the doubling of Yankee Duchess in the maternal families of both Yankee Glide and Ilia in a 4x5 pattern. And because Ilia is by Windsongs Legacy, you pick up an additional 5th generation cross to Yankee Duchess there. So Tight Lines is 4x5x5 to Yankee Duchess. And again, he was a very productive racehorse, made 625,000. Next slide. Long Tom followed a similar pattern in its line breeding of Yankee Duchess, 4x5x5, but also interestingly line breeds full brothers, American Winner and Super Pleasure, 3x3. So again, he was very successful by this type of serial line breeding and inbreeding. Next slide. And then in range does the same thing by tripling Yankee Duchess, this time 5x4x4, or sorry, no, I get a little lost here. 5x5x5, and actually doubles American Winner in the pedigree of bar hopping, with the full brother Super Pleasure in the 3rd position on in range. All of these repeated patterns from multiple stallions produced great racehorses. Next slide. So, as you can see, trying to match up horses that have Yankee Duchess in the pedigree is looking pretty good. And if you start looking at some of the great horses that have been crossed or been produced by these crosses, you see the type of power that this kind of line breeding of Yankee Duchess can bring. Yankee Duchess is a major influence in many U.S. sires: Muscle Hill and his sons, Windsongs Legacy, Chapter 7, Walner, Yankee Glide, S.J.'s Caviar, and Photo. Superior performers from this type of cross: Walner, Gimpanzee, Ramona Hill, S.J.'s Caviar, Fourth Dimension, Hypnotic AM, Alarm Detector, Long Tom, Odds On Amethyst, Venerable, Joviality S, Rebuff, Volume 8, Walner Payton, Special Way, Cool Papa Bell, In Range. It's just phenomenal what this type of cross has done. I'm going to look at some of the individual golden crosses. If you look at Chapter 7 on Muscle Hill mares, that's what Chapter 7 X Muscle Hill M means. 36% were $100,000 winners. The best is Joviality's, over 2 million now in Sweden. Chapter 7 by S.J.'s Caviar mares, 50% $100,000 winners. Chapter 7 on Yankee Glide mares, 25%. Chapter 7 on S.J.'s Photo mares, 29%. Chapter 7 on Ken Workington mares only gave 10% $100,000 winners, but obviously included in that group was Walner. Anything over 10% is good, and the higher than 10%, the better. Next slide. Here's another combination: the Muscle Hill Golden Crosses that line breed Yankee Duchess. Muscle Hill and Yankee Glide mares, 21% $100,000 winners. That cross produced Rebuff. Muscle Hill on Glide Master mares. And as you know, Glide Master is a pretty modest stallion, 25% $100,000 winners. The best on that cross made almost $700,000. Muscle Hill and Windsongs Legacy mares, 21,000. Ken Workington mares, 29%. S.J.'s Caviar, 7% $100,000 winners. You'll notice that one isn't such a good nick. Muscle Hill and S.J.'s Photo, only 8% $100,000 winners. If you look at Walner on Muscle Hill mares, already 23% $100,000 winners, which is phenomenal in a young stallion. The best was Venerable at over $1 million. Walner on Yankee Glide mares, 13%. Even Trixton, who himself is not thought to be such a great stallion, 25% of his babies from Windsongs Legacy mares are $100,000 winners. 20% on Yankee Glide mares. Not so good on Ken Workington mares. Next slide. Or Yankee Glide. Yankee Glide on S.J.'s Photo mares, 21% $100,000 winners. The best is Milligan School, who you're all familiar with from his racing victories in Sweden. Yankee Glide on S.J.'s Caviar, 25%. Yankee Glide on Windsongs Legacy, 41%. That's unheard of. Now, what's interesting is that S.J.'s Caviar as a stallion doesn't seem to do as well as the others. SJ's Caviar on old TV Yankee mares didn't do well at all. SJ's Caviar on Yankee Glide mares, 10%, $100,000 winners. Caviar on Windsongs Legacy, 10%. Caviar on Muscle Hill mares, no $100,000 winners. And Caviar on Ken Workington mares, no $100,000 winners. I think if I had to explain that, is that Caviar gets his Yankee Duchess through the less prominent, less successful sources of Yankee Bambino and TV Yankee. And the genes of Yankee Duchess that were passed through those individuals were probably not as potent as the ones through Yankee Glide, Chapter 7, and Muscle Hill, and Windsong. Next slide. Other attractive pedigree lines, I like Pine Chip in mares. It provides additional speedster blood through Arnie Almahurst rather than Valley Victory. Gimpanzee was very inbred to Pine Chip. Chapter 7 does very well with Pine Chip. Father Patrick, of course, his dam's grandsire is Pine Chip. And Ariana G, When Doves Cry, and Mission Brief, both have second dams whose sire is Pine Chip. To me, any superior female that also appears in the pedigree of a major stallion is attractive for line breeding. Next slide. Almost done here. Just talking a little bit about some other less established mares that I bought. This is a mare that I bought 2 years ago that I bred to Chapter 7. I'll show that pedigree in a minute. This mare won the Casual Breeze at 3 and was a full sister Yonkers Trot winner, Top Flight Angel. When I was looking for her, I was specifically targeting mares that had BJ's Pleasure, Yankee Duchess, and Pine Chip. She has all of those in her pedigree, and also Lyme breeds Armbro Goal in the dam. Her tail female goes to Sally Sovereign, so I thought that she would be a nice individual to get as a broodmare. Next slide. Again, I chose Chapter 7 for her largely because of the contributions of additional Yankee Duchess and Pine Chip to the foal's pedigree. There's also a 5x5 to Crowning Point that I thought was nice. So that's what I included in that breeding. It's just a baby, so we have a few years to see whether it's any good. Next slide. Here's a French mare that I just bought. Name is a Pearl. Her dam Little Pearl is from the immediate family of Bold Eagle and Brillantisime. This mare is bred very much like Bold Eagle himself, as she is 4x2 to Workaholic, whereas Bold Eagle is 4x3. This is basically a Star's Pride and Speedy Crown pedigree, as Workaholic goes through Speedy Crown, and Extreme Dream goes back to Star's Pride. So it's a really easy pedigree to use. I'm also breeding her to Chapter 7. Next slide. So we will just see how all that goes. you know, this is pretty much of an outcross pedigree, and we hope her baby is successful. Let's see, what's next slide? Next slide. And finally, this is a mare that I just bought at Harrisburg last year. Her name is Adore Me. She's currently racing and is in foal to Muscle Hill. She just got in foal about a month ago. I'll stop racing her soon. I bought her mainly because I was in love with her Grand Dam Bold Dreamer. When she came to auction, I just thought she was the most beautiful mare ever. I dragged my dad back to see her a half a dozen times, and until he just got mad at me and just said, "No more. Don't bring me back here. We're not buying her." Well, of course, Bold Dreamer ended up being the dam of Was It a Dream and Pampered Princess. And so I guess Dad wasn't right after all. But nevertheless, I've got her and I'm racing her. And next slide. Here is the cross with Muscle Hill. It's 2x5 to Valley Victory. I'm picking up a 3x4 cross to American Winner. We will just see how that goes. So what I also should say about Adore Me is that she is a good example of a mare who is bred on a successful nick. Father Patrick on Credit Winner mares has been a successful nick with 16% $100,000 winners. So that gave me more reason to buy her. I hope she's successful at the end. So that's, next slide. So that's pretty much my presentation. To sum up, intensely line-bred and inbred mares, especially over several generations, when that line breeding and inbreeding is to very top horses, can be extremely successful producers of good racing offspring. Thank you very much for listening, and I'd be happy to listen to any questions.
Hvis det noen som har noen spørsmål til Per, så det bare å skrive på chatten. Eller spørre. Det ikke så mange, så det bør kunne gå og spørre og skru på mikrofonen og spørre direkte. Eller via oversetter. Det spørsmål du, Erik? Ja. Jeg merket meg jo I noticed when I, in 1999, bought classical style from Sweden. She was from a great maternal line, but her father was crown sweep, and no one wanted crown sweep. So therefore I could afford to buy her. So that was the same way of thinking. Is it...
I think that can be extremely successful. I always look for mares like that. They're always overlooked. And you can see, you know, there's a lot of success with that. When I bought Back's Machine, she was in foal to Muscle Hill, who, Muscle's Yankee, I mean, who eventually became Q45, very successful horse. And I bought her for $19,000. Yankee Windsong, by practice, dam of Windsongs Legacy. I bought her for $23,000. Expressway Hanover was a practice. She became a world champion. She cost $12,000. You can give away a lot on the broodmare sire side, especially if he comes from a good maternal family and he himself is an outcross to major sire lines that you want to use in your breedings. And I think, Per Erik, the way you have bred that mare has perfectly fit that. And you've been extremely successful with it. Save a lot of money.
Yeah, of course. I think I gave 4,500 for her.
That's perfect. Look at all the fun you've had since then. Some of the best things that have ever happened to you with Cockstyle and the rest. So perfect example. And you can find mares like that. They're in the auctions, and the big buyers, they just look at them and why would I want that? And then they fall to you, and you don't pay much for them. But in my cases, as I said, you don't sell the first foal very well. But if that foal is good, everybody notices, and all of a sudden, everything takes off. Ilya, she was bred a little better than that, obviously, because of Windsongs Legacy, but her first two foals were 60,000. Since then, I've sold foals for 160, 200,000, 400,000, and 500,000. And that's because the first ones were great. And I paid 7,500 for her mother, and she was a homebred. I mean, what could be better than that? It can be done.
Yeah. But then it's important that the mare is rather young when you start, because then it can produce several babies after the first has been good.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a question. My name is
Yeah.
Gunnar.
Hello,
We met in Oslo and Paris with Per Erik.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. There's a menu over right in the middle of your face on this. I can't make it go away, so I don't see you very well, but hello.
Hello. It's a light maybe. And you have lost your mustache?
I did.
Yes, and so have I.
It was, everything was getting too gray and I looked like a little old man, so yeah, I thought it would be better.
Yeah, and now we're still young.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. I noticed one thing about your mares. You were not so very modern lines. You did not have the quick turnover on some of your mares. Is that correct, or?
No, I think that's true.
You go for more quality? Yes.
Well, but the lines that I've had are classic lines, and they still have a lot of power. I think, you know, some of the success that we're seeing in the U.S. with European stallions may be due to some of the older blood that's come back. If you look at the Windsongs Legacy line, there is old blood there. It's like everything had gotten so advanced and inbred through Speedy Crown, Valley Victory, you know, boom, 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 6 or 7 generations forward. And then suddenly the Muscle Hill isn't very fertile. And, you know, you start seeing infertility because of the inbreeding. I think part of the reason that the Windsongs Legacy line has been successful and the Garland Low Bell line before it has been because it was old blood.
Yes.
Yeah, acting as an outcross. So
Yes.
yes, and that's all part of going the other way from what's commercial, because everybody wants the Muscle Hill out of the Cantab Hall mare.
Yes.
Right? But I don't want to pay 300,000 for that mare. So I get the old blood that's still working.
Yes. Thank you. It's very interesting and very, as always, very interesting to listen to you, Paul.
Well, thank you, Gunnar. Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Thank you.
Flere som lurer på noe? Spør hvilken forventning man har til ready cash. Yeah. What are your expectations about the ready cash mare that you bought? It's a pearl.
I mean, I have nothing but the best hopes. I want to even get another French mare from the very best sire lines, and dam lines, and I very much believe that the U.S. bloodlines are such that they want to come back to the Stars Pride line again. You know, I see this big generational turnover. You see it with the Pacers and bringing back Volomite to the Pacers through some beach somewhere that just totally exploded and made really great horses. And I think we've seen the Valley Victory line run its course. A lot of the horses are getting inbred now to Andover Hall, Conway Hall, Angus Hall. You see that all through pedigrees. And what looks relatively new to a horse with that kind of breeding? Well, it's something from the Stars Pride line. It hasn't been used in a while. But there aren't any stallions that way in the US, right? I mean, there was Credit Winner, but he was a regional stallion in New York. He had several good ones. Sweden got Chocolatier, one of his best. And Archangel is still active up in Canada, but neither of them are set to revolutionize everything. But Ready Cash, of course, goes back to Neville Pride and ultimately Stars Pride. And what a wonderful, successful, powerful sire line to bring back to the U.S. Now, you know, I'm doing it backwards with the mare because, of course, she's not a Ready Cash stallion. She's a Ready Cash mare. But I'm trying it on that side. And I've also bred several times to Redley Express. I'm currently training a Redley Express filly. I had wanted a colt, but she's very nice. And I have another Redley Express on the ground, and I'm breeding back yet again to Redley Express. So I really do believe in the Ready Cash sire line, and my last big dream in breeding is to breed a superior Ready Cash hybrid colt out of a strong U.S. mare, race him myself and have him win a whole lot and be a successful stallion. If I could do that yet, I could prop my feet up and said that's enough for anybody's lifetime. But yes, that's my big dream now, and I'm trying. I don't have unlimited money, but I am trying.
It's a good plan.
Yeah. I think if anyone can do that, it's you.
Well, I think lots of people could, but I'm going to give it a shot.
You mentioned the Redley Express, and now one extra question, because we are very excited about Calgary Games. And what are your expectations on his breedings?
Well, I mean, of course, I like Calgary Games too, and I feel a little bit like I did about Walner, although Calgary Games is obviously more successful, but hasn't quite taken that final step to greatness. You know, Walner had that wonderful world record mile at 2, and then at 3 he had great qualifiers, but he got injured and didn't quite do well. And after that, and as a result of that, I very stupidly did not buy a share of Walner.
It's a quite similar story, maybe.
So yeah, so I have not bred to Calgary Games simply because of that. Maybe I just didn't learn my lesson, but I think he has a great pedigree, and you know, I like the use of Lindy Lane in the dam. I'd like to see him take that next step, but until he does, I personally am going to breed to his father instead.
Yes. It's like it's your way to do it, and it's
Well,
more safe. It's a more safer way.
Well,
Maybe.
maybe I don't know, or maybe I missed the boat like I did with Walner.
I hope so. Sorry.
No, I understand.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else, or I know we're running a little late.
It has been 1.5 intense hours. We have learned so much in so short time that our heads are just filled with knowledge.
Well, anyway, it's been a pleasure, and I always enjoy exchanging ideas with all of you. These are just ideas. Some of them work, some of them don't, but I try to identify patterns. There isn't a lot of science in this. The real science is coming in the future. But I think right now this is the best we can do to improve our odds of having success. And I think you can by applying certain sensible principles. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for helping us.
Thank you
so much.
Very nice.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you in Stockholm, maybe?
Probably next year, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Goodbye then.
Bye. Bye, folks.
Thank you. Goodbye.